This is a meeting of the Naming Rights Committee, and we are talking to Chris Barnett, member of the Performing Arts Center Board, and Missy DeNuno, their Executive Director. Sean, why don't we begin actually, before I forget, approving the minutes from the last meeting. Did you have any corrections?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, then the minutes will stand. Chris or Missy, do you want to start out with an update on where you're at with the naming rights?
Yes, I will let you go.
Okay. Thanks. So after our, thank you again for meeting with us. After our last meeting, we internally discussed what we would like to propose to the town. So there's two pieces of the naming rights. One is for the building itself, and one is for internal spaces such as offices, small performance spaces, conference rooms, things like that. We wanted to just say that we wanted to make a blanket exception that we will not be soliciting tobacco, firearms, alcohol, or cannabis companies for any naming rights possibilities. We've taken that off the table. The goal for the internal naming would be to go after corporate donors or large individual donors that could have a plaque on the door. And it would be, the Smith Room or, whatever the case may be, for a period of time. For the larger building, based on the comments, Sean, that you had made at the previous meeting, we looked at what would it take to name the building, and we determined that what the threshold we thought was worthwhile looking at was a 10-year commitment at $2.5 million, with the caveat that we did not want to lose the name Simsbury Meadows Performing Arts Center. That Simsbury Meadows Performing Arts Center, because it's our brand, it was important to keep in the name of the building. So it would be, it could be I don't want to use a company name, but say, the Smith Center at the Simsbury Meadows Performing Arts Center. We wanted to make sure that the corporate name and our name remain on the building, and that's how we brand it. We didn't want to lose our identity in the community. That's pretty much it, right, Missy?
Yeah.
That's it. Yep.
Yep.
So, Sean, my thought was that one of the things we shared the first time we met was, what's the right threshold? And I think there was a, feeling among this group that over $1 million at least would be the right number. And, we're talking about significantly more than that. So I didn't have any particular sort of concerns or cautions around what Chris shared. What about you, Sean?
No, I don't. My only comes to the next phase of it is when and how do you start getting those commitments? Because if there is town money, obviously that's a very different approval process than it being entirely self-funded and donated. So if there's an expectation of a town contribution, I think we're going to need to get advice on, does that need to be approved before there's a solicitation done? And if not, how do you protect the donors and the PAC with soliciting those funds with uncommitted town money? Right. For example, let's say you want to build a $5 million building and you raise 2.5 and the town has to kick in 2.5. That obviously needs to go through the budgetary process and to the voters, et cetera. So can you solicit donations before that approval, or do you have to wait till after the approval?
So the project cost for just construction costs minus architect fees and things like fundraising costs and things like that is in the neighborhood of 980, a little over that, 983 or something like that, $1,000. The $2.5 million for the naming rights of the building is not intended to fund the differential that we have to make up right now between what the funds that we have available and what we need to finish the project. That's going to come through solicitation of businesses, corporate sponsors, and individual donors. At $2.5 million for the naming rights, the goal would be to use that for ongoing programming and capital maintenance fund, so to speak, something like that. into the future. So that $2.5 million has nothing to do with the fundraising that we're going to be doing to build the new space.
So I guess I'm
Got it.
confused. I thought phase 2 was in the $5 to $10 million range, Chris.
No,
Oh.
no, it's 983 without the architect fees. And then we've got some fundraising costs in there for mailings and printing and postcards and stuff like that. But no, the construction is only, we have hard bids. It's 980. I'm saying 983. It could be 986. I don't have it in front of you, Sean, but it's under $1 million.
So, okay, so I think we're talking about two different phases then. Because phase 2 was always multiple millions of dollars, and we were trying to build the building on the back, and that was where we tried to do the senior center, and that was turned down, and there was $6 or $7 million that was going to get allocated to that. So I'm confused as to how it all of a sudden became less than $1 million.
So it's in addition to the existing building that
No, I understood.
that has bathrooms that are out facing for the public to, if for Rotary Park or whatever. It has internal bathrooms. It has green room space. It has office space. It has some other conference room spaces. It allows us to no longer rent trailers. It allows us to move Missy out of a shed into an office space that has bathrooms with year-round use instead of portalettes. And that's it.
Eric, you're remembering what I'm remembering, right?
My recollection I know we've talked about numerous scenarios, was that it was going to be closer to like a $2.5 million project. But
so I think I can explain this down for you.
About.
So when we went, remember we went and we applied for that state grant? We went 2.5, right? So just under one of that, as Chris mentioned, was construction. The on top of that was for things like an additional restroom out in the field and some additional enhancements that I think the town threw in, that it was like, okay, if we're going to put all this money in, we'll add all these things in. But if you really bare bones it, which we knew we had to do when we didn't get that grant, if we wanted to achieve this, we had to go bare bones just the back of that building. And that's what we're speaking about now, because we don't have the capacity to privately fundraise $2.5 million. So we've gone back to the architect. We've gone bare bones just to get exactly what we need to get rid of those trailers. And that's what we're talking about now as we're talking about a capital campaign. Chris, correct?
Oh.
No, that's correct.
So just from my history, and again, before Chris and Missy were involved, there was in the neighborhood of 5 to 10 million that was being asked of the town for the same project, essentially, that we're now down to less than $1 million.
I think that includes, Sean, if I'm not, and I was not involved, so I don't know all the history, but I think part of that included a roof.
No, the roof was separate. The roof was Dave Ryan's dream, and it was never part of phase 2. That was Dave's dream.
Yeah.
No one else wanted
Sean,
to do
I wonder
that.
if what you're thinking about is more the comprehensive senior center combination, whereas this is
No, I'm not. No, we tried to build this for them, and they turned us down. And again, all the things that Missy and Chris are saying was summarily dismissed as part of that, and there was at least $5 million that was needed. So I'm confused. Again, I'm good with the fact that it's $1 million. I'm confused that all of a sudden, again, a multi-million-dollar project became less than $1 million, because we would have done this 10 years ago if it was only $1 million.
I wasn't involved either, but the assumption is if you were going to take care of all the space we needed for the trailers, which is what we're talking about now, plus senior center use, I assume it was a far more enhanced drawing than we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, there was an additional component to senior center, but just the pack was multiple millions of dollars. So, okay. So at the end of the day, what you're telling me is that's entirely private or PAC funded. So there's no public money. Therefore, you don't need a public approval, but for the acceptance of the building and the process itself.
No, there's money from the town that's been earmarked, $350,000.
So earmarked and approved are two different things.
Yes, I know. So there's $350,000 that was earmarked, and then
that's the money we were going to spend on restrooms at Rotary Park.
Right.
So we would go through the budgetary process and allocate that, and then the PAC and private would come in with the remaining 600.
It's a little more than 600 because we've got fundraising costs associated.
Yeah, I'm not holding to a specific dollar, in the neighborhood of 600 to 700, whatever it is, right?
Yes. However, there is, we have one large donation right now, which, Eric, I don't know if, we have some reserves to use. We've got private fundraising to use. We've got one large donation that has restrictions on it that potentially can be used depending on how this project moves forward. And then there is that allocation not yet voted on, the earmarked money from the town.
Yeah, so that makes sense because I guess, Eric, from our side, it's going to be problematic if there's a $2.5 million donation out there used for future programming and not used for construction if the town's being asked to contribute.
Well, that 2.5, I would have to say, if we are lucky enough to get that, I think I'm frozen. If we're lucky enough to get that kind of donation, it would be for programming, and we have a responsibility to, I think based on our agreement, to do capital improvements on the property.
Yeah. Sean, my thought process, my reaction to the 350,000 is that, we identified a need as a town for, more permanent restroom facilities at Rotary Park. And, we think it makes more sense to do this as a combined project with the PAC and what they're doing. So to me, it feels appropriate that this, the town's contribution would be, part of this larger phase 2.
I don't disagree. The curveball, Eric, is that we're about to get hit with a monster Latimer number, which changes all capital. Yeah. And that's the problem. And we're going to be asked to find it in the capital plan. And, either we're not going to do the school or we're going to find the money, right? And that's the bogey we have hanging out there.
That's right.
And that didn't exist 3 months ago when we started talking about this.
Right.
So from a naming standpoint, I'm good.
I'm thinking about the scope of this committee.
And from a clarity, I would just want to make sure that everybody has talked to council on how and what you can commit to from a raising funds standpoint with the uncommitted town funds hanging out there. And just that everybody has a green light, if this gets approved by the Board of Selectmen, that it's appropriate to raise the money under these pretenses without the town portion being approved yet.
What are you saying, that the fundraising campaign needs to be approved by the Board of Selectmen?
No, the naming piece of it.
The naming piece of it. Okay.
And so, I think we'll have to discuss again that 2.5 would not be used to offset the 300,000+ of the town. I think that's an important question we're going to have to answer.
Okay. So who would draft the policy regarding, do you want us to draft something that you can send to the attorney for review for then consideration of the Board of Selectmen for what we would like the policy to be? Or what's the next step? Because if we're moving forward with this, we want to be able to go out there and start discussing this publicly. And we don't want to do that without the right approvals, because we don't want to backpedal on anything because we look unprepared.
Right.
Yeah, so I think we need to prepare collectively the draft of what the naming rights recommendation is for the full Board of Selectmen's consideration. And it's, as you outlined, Chris, right, the 2.5, not tobacco, not alcohol, et cetera, and what its stated purpose is going to be for. And then I think we have a side item, Eric, where we're talking about the rest of the fundraising as part of it, because I think whether it's germane directly to the issue or not, people are going to want to understand what's the 2.5 intended for. And then it raises the natural question of other capital items that are already being considered.
Right.
So I think we
guess
just
my
need
thought
to
would be,
address it head on.
Missy or Chris, if you were to send us those bullets in written form, I mean, Sean, let me know if you agree. We could pass that along to Bob, and he could put it in legalese that we could then approve in our August meeting.
I think that's correct.
Okay.
And I think the other piece, Sean, I don't know if you know, is that I think the PAC is going to be doing a presentation at our August 8th meeting. So that'll be an opportunity to pass that and also to engage the board around these questions.
I believe they're doing the presentation with the renderings.
Okay.
Right, Missy?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And Missy, just so you know, I would love an explanation of history, and I know you guys weren't involved, but in terms of how did we get from multiple millions of dollars down to 900 for presumably the same project?
We will prepare the folks presenting to answer those questions. We might have to get the Dave Ryans of the world involved, because I think there's like a number of us who just weren't Sean.
Yeah. Please don't let Dave tell me it's the roof, because it wasn't the roof.
Do you think that we need something? Maybe we do. I'm talking myself into it. I'm saying we need something that's like prepared legally that our board agrees to, because at the end of the day, we want to create, this committee exists so we create a process so that when you bring a company to us for naming rights, we'll approve it. So I'm wondering if it would make sense, if we need something legal to approve at our August meeting, or if we could just discuss this with the board in terms of those stipulations that Chris outlined and just get the board's sort of directional support.
I mean, my preference would be that this is buttoned up as soon as possible.
Okay. All right, then let's make it official.
Yeah, I don't want to, if this is going to happen, we have a very, very short time frame to raise funds in order to commit to the construction of this, because we can't do this year round. We have to do it off season.
Right.
So we have to hit the ground running October 1st, and we have to be done in May.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get to Bob. And then again, it would be good if there was some sort of sheet or form or submission preview or template that came to us, right? In terms of because we're going to actually have to approve the name, right?
Yeah.
So that's really where it matters, is we're going to give you the structure here, but this is how we're going to present the name to you. This is the information we're going to give you about the donor. This is the information, again, what it's tied to, et cetera. Just almost like an application sheet or a template that shows us when we're in the future going to be asked to approve the names. Here's how it comes to us as well. Because what I don't want is, Chris, for you to get in there to secure a donation, we come for the approval, and then people go ask you for 10 more pieces of information out of left field.
Right.
So at a high level, again, the name, obviously, what it's for, the stated purpose, right? And then again, what are the restrictions? What are what's the time period, committed, funded, et cetera? Just, some of the high level stuff I would imagine around a donation. We don't want to get into an Amber Heard situation here, right?
Okay, so you want the bullet points for the policy, and then an application template for you to submit to Bob after your review, for him to put into a legal form.
Yeah, and I think that protects both you, the donor, and us, just in terms of clarity of this is what we're going to get, guys, and it's essentially a rubber stamp unless something is out of whack, and then we talk about it, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I mean, it sounds like, a little bit of process up front, but I think at the end of the day, it'll protect both of us so there won't be any surprises. So I agree with that.
So just a logistical question, because this is such an interesting relationship, let's say we get a donor from, that would be wonderful at that level. Okay. We get that donor. That donation is subject to, even though the donation is going to SIMPAC, that donation is subject to town approval, is how we would have to word that application, correct?
No, I think you're committing to the naming is subject to the town approval. I don't think the donation is.
Okay, so the acceptance of the donation's not, but the naming of the space, because it's a town facility, is subject to town approval by the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah,
I believe so. Now that's where we need to get Bob to understand, because again, when we go build the capital project, are you doing it? Sounds like you are. We're not doing it. We're giving you money to go do it.
Well, well, that's still up in the air. It depends on what Bob's opinion is on prevailing wage.
Yeah, Bob's weighing in on this right now, Sean.
Yeah, so that's going to dictate who accepts the donation as well.
Well, but that donation, so the regular donations, whether for the internal rooms and or just for the campaign, are donations for this particular project. The larger naming rights donation is not earmarked for this project. It's earmarked because it's going to be money that will be donated over the course of a number of years by that company, potentially. We need the money now. This is not money that we would have now. This is money for future improvements and programming, so we can become less of a rental facility producer. Right, Missy?
No, and I understood. So, but I think it's, if we're going to build the rooms on your behalf, you can't name them without our approval, because it's a town asset that you're naming, and we're the only ones that have the right to name things. If you're going to build it and name it and donate it to us, I think Bob is going to have a different opinion, meaning you can do it that way. But if we're going to build it, then we're the ones that have to approve the names.
Understood. So it's really going to come down to what Bob's opinion is on prevailing wage and who is going to be doing this project or not.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's
saying the same thing, Chris. Sorry. Yeah.
So there's really two. Do I prepare two different paths depending on what that outcome is in terms of process?
No, I think it's the same. I think it's the same form. It's the same intention of again, it's a generic donation form with naming rights for either internal or future external, but it all goes to the same concept of, if the town needs to approve naming rights, what is the information we need to grant those rights? Right, whether it be a room or whether it be the entire facility. I think the process is consistent, unless, Eric, you're feeling different.
I think it makes sense.
Okay. All right, Missy and I can work on that.
Okay.
After she finishes the concert tonight.
Yeah.
All right, I do need to drop, guys.
All right, thanks, Sean.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
All right.
Aye. All right.
Thanks
Thank you.